This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. I have a chat with the great Bruce Kulick to share with you. This chat was recorded back in May or June of 2017 and has been available via the Scars and Guitars podcast apps ever since then. This is the first time I'm repurposing the chat for the YouTube audience because so many more people tune in via YouTube, let's face it. Now, throughout this chat here, I should say the catalyst for the conversation was the Thunder Down Under 2017 tour. Bruce does have a considerable fan base in Australia, being a member of KISS, and a very important member of that group, by the way. I don't think that band would have survived intact if it weren't for his contributions throughout that era, and also Eric Singer, the current drummer, but love what those guys did throughout the 80s and through the 90s, through Revenge, and the big one, as you'll hear me talk about, Carnival of Souls. So yeah, the catalyst is this tour that happened in 2017, Thunder Down Under, but there's a ton of other topics that are covered. Union and John Corabi, in addition to KISS and being part of a famously musical family. His brother is Bob Kulick, who subbed for Ace on many songs. Those in the know will know. And his relationship with Meat Loaf and what he did in the Bat Out of Hell tour, that also gets a mention. Yeah, it's a really cool chat. I like Bruce a lot. He's one of my favourite musicians ever, actually. So here he is, the great Bruce Kulick.
You're one of those guitarists that I think anybody that's listened to the radio would have heard at least at some point, such as the length and breadth of your contribution to rock and roll. I'll ask you for your take on your career as you look back over the past, and I think I counted you up to about your 45th year of recorded music history.
Wow, you're making me humble now and older. It still means the same to me as when I was 20. So I'm all good with that. I'm flattered that you figured that out. Thank you. But the biggest, I guess, really for me, what I've noticed, especially more recently, because KISS has gone on for such a long time, it's still such a important band for rock and roll. Sure. Of course, in 2014 with the Hall of Fame, as much as it was controversial as well, but still, there was that recognition, and the fans they seem to go generation to generation, which is a blessing, and many of them dig deep and discover me, which is wonderful. So I have all these fans that were not born or even barely conceived when I was in the band, now following me, and that's pretty remarkable. So, and you can't say that about a lot of bands. So you know what, that part of it really makes me humble about the idea that when I was in KISS and doing my job, and I always loved playing guitar, and being in KISS was fairly natural for me, but I would not possibly think that we'd be talking about KISS 30 years later, and people would be making all these celebrations. Actually, if you're talking about some of the earliest stuff I did with them, you're talking 33 and a half years, that's right. Almost 34 years. And all of that is just mind blowing for me. It truly is. And I love the stuff that people share. They finally have digitized, like bumping into me at a hotel, or that meet and greet, or the gig where they took a picture on an Instamatic or whatever the heck they had,
Yeah.
So it's really become quite humbling for me, and in a big way, I'm very gratified to think that something that happened so long ago is important to people now.
So you're coming to Australia for the Thunder Down Under 2017 tour. You must be aware that you personally, and you've touched on it a little bit already, but you personally have a considerable following in Australia.
I love that. Yes, I really, I through the years kept, as much as I'd go, I'd still get that email after I was just there that year. Yeah. When are you coming down to Australia, mate? And I'm like, oh God. All right, but maybe they're from a city that I didn't go to, because I have been stingy that way by only really having the time or the opportunity to hit, Melbourne and Sydney. Sometimes I've ventured out to Adelaide and maybe only one or two times to Brisbane. Perth has really been since 96. Okay.
Yes.
So, it's certainly exciting to think that on this tour, finally, I'm getting an opportunity to go to places I've never been before. So that's really exciting to me.
Well, you're a man in demand, so Perth can Perth can wait, but I'm sure that they'll be patient.
Yes. Yeah, I hope so. Yes.
So I'm going to dive into a period of your career that I feel is incredibly underrated, and that's the Carnival of Souls album. So I'm going to court controversy a little bit and say that it's easily my favourite Kiss album. It's actually the album that I got into Kiss through as well.
Wow, that is weird. That's almost backwards engineering with Bruce Kulick. Okay, go ahead.
So what are your feelings about that album today, and can we expect to hear any of those album cuts on the upcoming tour?
I was thinking of seeing if Sisters Doll, who's my backing band, the Talented Young Brothers, how they did on if we rehearse I Walk Alone and if we can, pull it off reasonably. Because it is the song I sang with the band, the only song I ever sang in Kiss. But getting back to that record, I have to admit, I know Paul doesn't like it at all. And it was done at an interesting time. We did Revenge, and that was a really strong, powerful record with Bob Ezra producing. And it still couldn't put Kiss back in the limelight because music was changing. You had the whole Seattle thing happening with bands like that. Yeah. And, it's not like, we didn't enjoy certain things from bands like Stone Temple Pilots and Nirvana and, Alice in Chains and bands like that. But the point was fashion and what was hip and what was cool. And the Revenge tour was successful, but not what it should have been for an album that strong. Same thing with the sales of Revenge, and that's such a great record. But when we revamped and, we toured for it, we went international, did things, we did the convention tour, we were always writing. And part of what we were doing writing was a kind of an idea of we weren't going to go with a poppier record, so we just started to think about what would be even a more darker, heavier record than
Revenge. And that's what I love about it. It is a darker, heavier record, and it's a different side of Kiss, and it's a side, to be frank, that I wish was explored more. And I think your contribution, I'm going to sound like I'm a bit of a fanboy here, but I really heard your contribution on that record above all other records that you played on in Kiss. Is that a fair assessment, or have I read too much into that?
Well, no, you're correct. I was going through a lot of changes in my life. I was going through the start of separation and eventual separation from the woman I was married to at the time, and what all I wanted to do was play my guitar, and I was hungry, and I seemed to plug into these dark, heavy riffs that I could throw at both Gene and Paul, who probably weren't that familiar with that, but had a desire to explore. So I lucked out with all these co-writes, and it's not like I didn't contribute on other records or, that's my largest contribution is Carnival of Souls. What I'm saying is I did throw more ideas at Revenge, but I wasn't always in the writing clique at the time. If Ezra and Bob, Bob and Paul were working hard and I remember one time Ezra hearing me play something that I worked on with my brother for something because I started it, but I didn't finish it. I didn't get even a chance to get it past Gene or Paul. And Ezra said, "What's that? I like it." And I said, "Well, I was hoping to, have Paul or Gene finish it, and it didn't happen." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, so each album, to be honest, during my years with Kiss, it's always a challenge to make Gene or Paul really zone in and say I want to work on that. You don't know what they're going to react to, and you can't. Music's subjective, and taste. Kind of just like certain food and everything. You know what I mean? The choices are wide and very, very different. So the two of, and then there was the issue with them was if you played something for Gene, you can't play it for Paul. You know what I mean? It was so you had to pick and choose your battles and everything. anyway, and that was always like an interesting dynamic, but understandable. Groups are very much like that.
Yeah.
Just like within a family, you could tell one brother one thing, but you wouldn't mention that to your sister or something, whatever.
Yeah.
So
can definitely relate to that. Yes.
yeah. I mean, I only have one sibling, but I just know that families have dynamics like bands. So somehow I just was dialed in right, and I remember Gene and Paul were both very appreciative of it because they did like what I was coming up with, and we started the record because we took a commitment from the record company, but it was a very odd time for the band because we had the material and we made the commitment, but we didn't really start. And then we did Unplugged, and unbeknownst to me, officially they were actually negotiating the reunion tour.
Yep.
So I remember calling Gene and saying, why aren't we recording yet? I know you got Toby Wright to co-produce with you guys. What's going on? Kind of a
Is that right?
call.
Toby Wright from Korn, or the Korn producer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Allison changed too. And he knew a lot of people in the same circle as us, so it was kind of a logical choice. I do think that Toby did some really great things for the album, and I think at times he couldn't relate well enough to what Gene and Paul are about. So there was a lot of tension during that recording with him, especially with Gene at times, oddly enough. But in the end, anyway, Gene was like, I'll get back to you. And sure enough, we started recording. I think they realized that no matter what they were negotiating, they made a commitment with the record company. You know what I mean? And we were supposed to record. And think about it. It was pretty brilliant because let's say Ace or Peter started to get very difficult, right?
Yeah.
Then they still have the current version of Kiss moving forward and creating and working, right?
Yeah.
Because we were under, I technically wasn't under a contract, but Gene and Paul and the band called Kiss was under contract. So very interesting time.
So,
and I'm glad you like it, but some people, that's a very odd record for Kiss.
Oh, look, I appreciate that it is, but I mean, I'm 39. Okay, so grunge was effectively my era.
Well, there you go.
And
if all you cared about was Shout It Out Loud in the beginning, you might have gone like, what happened? They took heroin. What happened to these guys?
Oh, I just love the grit, and it's a shame that Paul doesn't get into it because I think that the heavier nature of the record really lends itself to his voice. Funnily enough, you'd think that his voice is a bit more poppy, but no, it really works.
I think he did some incredible stuff on that record. I was proud once it finally came out when the dust settled for the reunion tour, and they needed to, the record company said, "We're putting this out." Because Paul promised me, even though there were terrible bootlegs of it, he did promise it would come out. And sure enough, there it was. And the bootlegs were terrible. But when it came out almost like an afterthought. And Jungle was the single, so that song,
that's right,
particularly is a terrific Paul vocal and co-write, and that was me playing bass on it actually, and cool. Most of the guitars. Yeah. So I'm quite proud of, and that single actually charted pretty well. But there was no real promotion and no gigs. That version of the band wasn't there. So,
and
under that.
In the same era, you formed Union with John Corabi, and another record that I just love to this day. What are your thoughts on that project, and can we even expect any album cuts from that album on the upcoming tour?
I know there are fans in Australia with Union because when we went there with ESP, when John and I went there with Eric Singer, we'd always do a couple of Union tracks because Eric liked the band as well. But I haven't been thinking about that because just that there's just too much, Kiss material that I feel the fans would like to hear. I'm real proud of those records though, and John and I definitely had a certain chemistry together. I feel that was quite natural. It was both funny that we were both like, the bands we were known for just left us behind and moved on. You know what I mean?
It was a bit like that, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and at the time, actually, we were both having a similar parallel in our relationships. With women, so that was pretty weird too. So we had a lot to bond over, and we're very different type of people. He's tattooed and pierced, and and I faint at the sight of a needle. So but there was a certain chemistry there, and I think it was a terrific band, and we were one of those bands that should have but didn't.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you need to get down here more often, to be honest with you, because if you've got so much, the fan attention is on the Kiss stuff right now. I almost think you could come down and tour with your other stuff, including, Carnival of Souls is, of course, Kiss, but also the Union stuff and other stuff that you've been involved in.
Right.
As I mentioned, you do personally have a big fan base down here. So when was the last time you were in Australia?
Well, I was able to do some work in '95, and it was interesting. I only did one full concert, though I did perform at the Kiss Expo. There was also an expo, but much more outside of Melbourne, not more towards the center of the city, like we are, at Wicks and Cumming. But the one gig in Adelaide was wonderful. And then I wound up doing some clinics for the Allen's chain of music shops. Yes. Okay. And that was fun. I always enjoy doing those things. I will be doing clinics on both days of the Melbourne Expo, which is really fun for the people to, it's kind of like, pulling the curtain back on some of the tracks that I perform with that they get to hear in a unique way, and I could talk about it. But I also jammed at that fun gig in Sydney. I sat in with, not only did I do a masterclass thing for the music store, but I played at that Frankie's Pizza place, which was a lot of fun.
Cool.
So I did a lot of different things on that trip. This one's more of a real legitimate full-on kind of tour, which kicks off with two expo dates, and then there's 7 gigs. So this is a little more unique, but I'm looking forward to it. I think the gigs are a great bill. Sisters Doll has a lot of energy, and they're really super talented young kids that love this era of music and style, even that is just something I'm well aware of. But I think they're sharing it with new generations, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, passing it on down the family.
Yeah. And 4 by Fate, obviously, those guys are. They have a Kiss connection with both of their work. John and Todd have spent their time with Ace and other known artists. So they have some really good melodic rock. I listened to their record, and they're a fine band. So you got a really strong bill there too, with me at the top.
So you mentioned your brother earlier, just quickly, and you are from a famously musical family. So your brother obviously is Bob Kulick, and much like yourself, has appeared on so many songs that it'd be almost impossible not to have heard his stellar guitar playing. What do you think it is about the Kulick family producing such gifted guitarists?
Well, I think it is very, very unusual. I will admit, I don't see it a lot, but I certainly, it's remarkable to me that you can hear some similarity in our playing, and yet we're not exactly the same, So I'm glad that he's older, which meant he was able to expose me to stuff that I probably wouldn't have found out if I didn't have an older brother.
Yeah.
And that was valuable. And he was the one that would do, these brave trips to England and come back and go like, look at the way they do G chords there, and check this out. You know what I mean? And he would turn me on to so many incredible things that I'm very fortunate about having that, kind of like brother in my life. And of course, there he was auditioning for Kiss the same time as Ace. How unusual is that?
Yes.
And they really liked Bob, but they went with Ace, and obviously history proves that was it. But to think years later, when Ace was, whatever his issues were, Bob gets the call to be ghost guitar, on a Kiss album, and it's pretty incredible, the whole connection between my family and Kiss. And when I first met Gene and Paul, Gene was very casual. Just, I got to go up to the studio when they were working on Creatures of the Night. With Paul occasionally, because my brother was his friend, and Paul was a huge rock star living like a king in New York City, Bob would go like, come on along, let's go. We were in Queens, and I'd drive in and we'd go, we're going to the movies with Paul Stanley. You know what I mean? I was like, whoa, that's kind of cool. But it wasn't, it wasn't that Paul Stanley, okay? You know what I mean?
Just the regular bloke who wanted to have a slice of pizza and a pint of beer after the gig.
Let's go see E.T., you know what I mean? What? Okay, we're going to movies. Okay, yeah, cool. Or Close Encounters or something. I remember we saw one of those sci-fi films. Or there was a really cool hip club called Privates down in Manhattan that we got to go to. But for me to be kind of like that other guy, hanging out with Paul Stanley, that was kind of weird. I'm not saying I really got to know him well. I realized it was like very unusual, but my brother's connection and Paul knew my brother. When you have that level of fame, you're very, very careful with your circle of
course,
people.
It'd have to be, yeah.
So, but that helped when Paul realized, I'm hearing good things about Bruce, not only from Bob, from other musicians in LA. I mean, rather in New York at the time. So I got the call. So that's how I really got my start. So I'm grateful to my brother, obviously, for the introduction. But the rest was all my own. It had to be my talent and my ability to work with these guys, because
sure.
There's a lot of talented people out there. I'm always in awe of how many gifted people there are, but they can't seem to put it together in their life to get from A to B is what I like to say, because you really need to be able to build your career and present yourself properly and be professional, and that. A lot of that stuff has nothing to do with your talent.
No, it doesn't. It's more like your professional outlook, isn't it, really, which you've got? Yeah.
And I'm sure even in your job, you see some people more successful. They could be more successful than you, but, they have other parts of the life that not very together. But, it's kind of hard to make everything work for yourself.
Nothing's more common than unfulfilled potential, I can tell you. It's the one thing I notice is almost every industry, every job, every career has in common of people who just aren't fulfilling their potential.
Right.
Have we got time for one more question, or have you got a...
Yeah, sure. Do one more, yeah.
Okay. So not many people will know that I think both you and your brother were in Meat Loaf's touring band during the massive Bat Out of Hell tour. Is that correct?
We were both there, and that was Fat Out of Hell. I remember the headlines, yes.
Yeah. What are your memories of the tour and playing with your brother there?
That was my first time in Australia, and I was blown away. I was very impressed. And it was great. Of course, it took a long time for me to return, and that was with Kiss. And now, of course, I've been doing it a lot on my own. But I remember I'm still friends with a girl I met at one of the famous radio stations back there. Then you'd meet the radio stations, and my friend Kimbo is still, down there, and she knows so many people I know too from LA. It's kind of a small world, but the point is, I have to say that I just immediately had a connection with the people there that I felt very comfortable, and those gigs, were cool. I mean, yeah, he passed out, and there he was with the oxygen. So the headline read, "Fat Out of Hell." So that's my biggest memory of it. Really, it was very funny. But I had a great time. I really did have a great time.
Wonderful. On that note, thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to see you down here. I'll certainly be in the audience. So hopefully we'll catch up and I'll say good day. And I'll be
wonderful. And which city are you?
I'm in Brisbane.
Brisbane. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's like I describe that one as the Florida of Australia.
It is. So, yeah, it's wonderful. A lot like that.
Yeah. All right. Look forward to seeing you.
No worries, mate.
Well, there you have it. The legendary Bruce Kulick. What an awesome fella. I enjoyed that one there. I hope one day he thinks about releasing a biography, because he has a heck of a story to tell, no doubt about that. So if you like that chat, I've had a conversation with Peter Criss from Kiss as well, the original Catman. You can find that on YouTube. Just search via my channel, easily found. Yeah, over at scarsandguitars.com there are many more conversations from the luminaries, the leading lights, from the world of hard rock, heavy metal, extreme metal and beyond. Click on the podcast link and you'll get to sample some of them. And if you like listening, maybe you like reading, because I've released a book, Scars and Guitars Volume 1. Click on the link in the banner on the website. You'll be taken to a marketplace of your choice and you can download a sample. Try before you buy if you like, and if you do complete the purchase, hit me up, because I want to thank you personally. There's some more information to share with you about the book in the moment, but before we get to that, I'm going to bid you a fond farewell. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast. Until next time, it is a very goodbye for now.
This is Eric Rattan of Carnival Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew Mackay-Smith.
I've been the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast since 2017. The first musician I interviewed for the show was David Vincent from Morbid Angel, and things have just snowballed from there. In all, I've posted almost 650 podcast episodes featuring conversations with many of the leading lights of rock, heavy metal, and beyond. It just got to a point where I thought, I need to write a book about all this, so that's exactly what I did. In Scars and Guitars Volume 1, you'll read a heap of deep reveals and commentary, such as Des Fafara talking about Coal Chamber and why the band will never return.
You know, if you're a band just starting out, you need to hear me. Do not start a band with partners. Ever.
Yeah, wise words there. Sage advice, mate, for anybody.
Don't ever, because I can't go do Coal Chamber right now unless I get others involved.
Phil Anselmo talks about the episode in his career which gives him the greatest sense of accomplishment.
I think the staying power of the fans and the staying power of the songs, you know, whether it's Pantera, Down, or Superjoint, the fans remember the songs.
Alex Skolnick from Testament confirms that, yes, playing the guitar in Ozzy's band is anything but an ordinary gig. Will Silent Oz from Dimmu Borgir write a book? Pa from Sabaton gives advice to people who want to start a band.
Look at the team around you, look at the bandmates. If the guys want to be on the stage, then it's all cool. If the guys want to be backstage, then it's not going to be cool.
Current and former members of Cradle of Filth discuss the band's seminal 90s material. Read about the reaction to George Lynch and Mark from Suicide Silence's comments when they throw shade at then President Donald Trump.
We have this idiotic monster, you know, this egotistical, self-aggrandizing, complete piece of shit in there. I just can't understand how we've gotten to this place.
And yeah, we kicked a hornet's nest with Sepultura. Percussive overlord Gene Hoglan talks about recording with Chuck Schuldiner.
Chuck was always, he was very open-minded, and he was into having his musicians that were playing with him just reach out for the best stuff that they had.
Phil Campbell from Motorhead discusses what it takes to get sober. John Five answers his critics who dismiss his tenure with Marilyn Manson.
You know, my name is John Five, and Manson gave me that name, and I had some of the best years of my life in that band and learned a lot.
And we get the lowdown on Treyarch Zagtoth from those who would know, including his mother. All across Scars and Guitars Volume 1, there are moments of tension, relief, tragedy, exhilaration, and throughout it all, you'll obtain insight that I believe no one else has managed to obtain from many of your favourite artists. So treat yourself. Scars and Guitars Volume 1 is currently available as an ebook with a print edition on the horizon. Follow the links attached and download a sample. I'm sure you'll be compelled to read the whole book.